The royal guard noticed a strange liquid in Kate Middleton's tea. His action saved the princess. The morning inside the palace began like many others, calm and carefully planned. Soft light entered through tall windows, touching the polished floors and the quiet hallways. Everything moved according to schedule. Staff members walked with purpose, speaking in low voices, making sure every small detail was correct. In a place like this, routine was not boring, it was protection. Order meant safety. Princess Kate started her day early, as she often did. She followed a structured routine shaped by years of public life. Her morning included briefings, light reading, and moments of quiet before official duties began. She valued these peaceful hours. They allowed her to prepare herself mentally for the responsibilities ahead. To those around her, she appeared calm and composed, unaware that this ordinary morning would soon become anything but ordinary. Nearby, the royal guard stood at his post. He was not new to this life. Years of service had trained his body and mind to remain alert even when nothing seemed wrong. He understood that danger rarely announced itself loudly. Most of the time, it arrived quietly, hiding behind normal scenes. His job was to notice what others ignored, to question what seemed harmless, and to protect without drawing attention. He had grown used to the rhythm of palace life. The sound of footsteps, the timing of meals, the way staff moved through rooms, it all formed a pattern. Over time, he learned these patterns so well that even the smallest change stood out to him. To most people, the palace felt peaceful. To him, peace was something that had to be guarded constantly. As the morning progressed, staff prepared refreshments in a nearby room. Tea was part of the princess's routine, served with care and precision. Every step followed strict rules. Ingredients were checked, utensils cleaned, and service carried out by trusted personnel. The guard watched from a respectful distance, not interfering, just observing. Observation was one of his strongest skills. He noticed the way the tea was poured, the cup placed on the tray, the steam rising gently. Nothing seemed unusual at first glance. Staff members moved on, confident they had done their job well. The tray was then carried toward the room where Princess Kate would soon sit. The guard's eyes followed the movement naturally. He had seen this moment hundreds of times before. Yet this time, something tugged at his attention. It was not a clear alarm, not a sharp warning, but a quiet feeling that something was off. He couldn't explain it right away. Experience had taught him not to ignore such feelings. As the tray passed closer, he noticed the tea more carefully. The color looked slightly different. It was subtle, so subtle that anyone without training would miss it completely. The surface of the liquid reflected light in an unusual way, almost as if it were separating slightly. It was not dramatic. It did not look dangerous, but it did not look right. His mind immediately began to work through possibilities. Could it be the lighting? Could it be a different blend of tea? Could it be nothing at all? He reminded himself not to jump to conclusions, but he also reminded himself of his duty. In his line of work, ignoring a small doubt could lead to serious consequences. He watched the staff member carry the tray forward, closer to the princess's sitting area. The room was quiet, comfortable, and safe-looking. Princess Kate had not yet reached for the tea. She was speaking softly with an aide, focused on her schedule for the day. The guard felt time slow down. He knew he had only moments to decide what to do. Speaking up would interrupt the routine. It could embarrass staff. It could create confusion. And if he was wrong, he would face questions. But if he stayed silent and something was wrong, the cost could be far greater. He remembered his training. He remembered the lessons drilled into him over the years. Trust your observation, trust your instincts, act early, act calmly. Protection was not about fear. It was about responsibility. Without raising his voice or causing alarm, he stepped forward. His movement was controlled, respectful, and firm. He addressed the staff member politely, asking for a brief pause. His tone did not suggest panic, only caution. Those nearby looked at him with mild surprise. This was not part of the usual routine. Princess Kate turned her attention toward him, sensing the shift in the room. She did not appear alarmed, only curious. She had long trusted the professionalism of the guards around her. The guard explained that he had noticed something unusual and needed to follow protocol. He did not accuse anyone. He did not make dramatic claims. He simply requested that the tea be temporarily removed for review. His calm confidence carried weight. The staff hesitated for a moment, then complied. The tray was taken away quietly. The room returned to stillness, though a new tension now lingered beneath the calm. Princess Kate was offered an alternative refreshment while the matter was checked. She accepted without complaint, trusting that safety always came first. Behind the scenes, the guard reported his observation to his superiors. The process that followed was careful and discreet. Nothing in the palace happened loudly unless it absolutely had to. Privacy and control were essential. As he waited, the guard reflected on the moment. He did not feel proud or nervous. He felt focused. He knew that even if the tea turned out to be harmless, he had done the right thing by speaking up. His responsibility was not to be liked or praised. It was to protect. Staff members continued their duties, though now with increased awareness. Procedures were reviewed quietly. The palace maintained its calm appearance just as it always did. To an outsider, nothing had changed, but within the walls, attention sharpened. Princess Kate continued her day with grace. She was accustomed to security checks and understood their importance. Though she did not know the details, she sensed that something had been prevented before it became a problem. She trusted the people tasked with her safety, knowing their work often went unseen. The guard returned to his position, eyes alert, posture steady. He did not know yet what the examination would reveal, but he knew one thing for certain: paying attention had mattered. A routine morning had been interrupted by a single observation, and that observation had the power to protect a life. As the palace settled back into its rhythm, the importance of quiet vigilance became clear. The most critical moments did not always involve chaos or danger in plain sight. Sometimes, they began with a simple cup of tea and a guard who refused to ignore a feeling that something was wrong. And so, what started as an ordinary morning quietly marked the beginning of a story that few would ever hear. A story of awareness, responsibility, and the unseen choices that keep people safe every day. After the tea was quietly taken away, the palace returned to its calm surface. But underneath that calm, something had changed. The royal guard remained at his post, yet his attention sharpened even more. His mind replayed the moment again and again. The color, the light, the feeling that told him something was not right. He knew that once a concern was raised, every second mattered, even if everything appeared peaceful on the outside. The tea was carried to a secure area away from public spaces. Only authorized staff were allowed inside. The process was discreet as always. No one raised their voice. No one rushed. In the palace, urgency did not look like chaos. It looked like quiet efficiency. Security officers began reviewing the situation step by step. They checked the time the tea was prepared, who had access to the kitchen, and who handled the tray. Every movement was logged. Nothing was assumed. The goal was not to accuse but to understand. Mistakes could happen, and sometimes unusual things had simple explanations. Still, no possibility was ignored. The royal guard was asked to explain exactly what he had noticed. He spoke carefully, choosing his words with precision. He described the slight difference in appearance, the way the liquid reacted to the light, and the instinct that told him to act. He made it clear that he was not certain of danger, only certain that something did not match what he had seen countless times before. His superiors listened closely. They did not interrupt him or question his judgment harshly. In their line of work, Instinct backed by experience was valued. They knew this guard had earned trust through years of steady service. While the review continued, Princess Kate followed her schedule with small adjustments. Meetings were slightly delayed, routes were subtly changed, and staff remained close. Nothing about her behavior suggested fear. She was calm, focused, and composed as she always was. To her, safety checks were part of daily life, not something to worry about. Still, those closest to her sensed a shift. Conversations were shorter. Movements were more deliberate. Everyone understood the importance of caution without needing to be told. In the secure area, specialists examined the tea carefully. They did not rush the process. They observed, tested, and compared it with standard samples. Even the cup and tray were inspected. In places like this, details mattered more than speed. As time passed, the royal guard waited. Waiting was often the hardest part of the job. Action was clear and direct, but waiting required patience and trust in the system. He stood straight, his expression neutral, though his thoughts were active. He wondered if he had imagined the difference. He wondered if he would be told everything was fine. But even if that happened, he knew he would not regret his choice. Nearby, staff members quietly discussed their duties. Some felt uneasy, though they did not know the full story. Others trusted that the procedures in place would handle whatever needed to be handled. The palace had faced many challenges over the years, and its strength came from preparation and discipline. Eventually, word reached the guard that preliminary findings suggested the tea was not as it should have been. The exact reason was still unclear, but it was enough to confirm that his concern had been valid. The issue could have been contamination, a mistake, or interference. What mattered most was that the princess had not consumed it. Security teams increased monitoring immediately. Entry points were reviewed. Recent activity was examined again with sharper focus. This was done quietly, without drawing attention or causing fear. The public would never know anything had happened, and that was exactly the point. The guard felt a steady sense of relief, not pride. Relief that he had acted in time. Relief that training had guided him correctly. Relief that the system had worked. He was not called a hero. No one clapped or congratulated him openly. In his profession, success meant nothing happened. A protected moment looked like an ordinary moment to everyone else. Princess Kate was later informed that a security concern had been addressed. She was not given unnecessary details. She did not ask for them either. She thanked the staff calmly and continued with her responsibilities. Her trust in the people around her remained strong. As the day went on, the palace slowly returned to its normal rhythm. The heightened alert softened slightly, though awareness remained high. Staff continued their work, guards remained focused, and life moved forward. The royal guard stood watch as he always had. His eyes scanned the space, his posture steady. He understood something deeply in that moment, that protection was not about dramatic actions or visible threats. It was about noticing small things before they grew into larger ones. Later, as his shift continued, he reflected on how easily the situation could have gone unnoticed. One moment of distraction, one decision to stay silent, and the outcome could have been very different. That thought stayed with him, reinforcing why his role mattered. The palace lights softened as the day moved on. Meetings ended, corridors quieted, and routine slowly reclaimed its place. To anyone outside those walls, it was just another peaceful day. Inside, however, a silent lesson had been reinforced. Safety was not guaranteed by walls or tradition alone. It depended on people, on their awareness, their courage to speak up, and their willingness to act even when doubt existed. The royal guard did not see himself as special. He was one of many who shared the same duty. Yet that day, his attention had made the difference between risk and protection. As evening approached, the matter was sealed within official channels. Reports were filed, procedures adjusted, and lessons noted. The palace moved forward, stronger for it. And so, what began with a quiet doubt continued into a careful response, one built on discipline, trust, and the understanding that even the smallest detail could carry great importance. The next phase began quietly, without announcements or visible changes to the outside world. Inside the palace, however, everything moved with careful intention. What the royal guard had noticed was no longer just a concern. It was now a matter that required full attention. The situation had reached a point where decisions had to be made quickly, but wisely. Senior security officers gathered in a private room. Their faces showed focus, not fear. Each person understood the responsibility they carried. They reviewed timelines again, matching movements, access points, and procedures. Nothing was rushed. The goal was clarity, not blame. The royal guard was asked to remain available. He answered questions patiently, repeating details without exaggeration. He described the exact moment his attention shifted, what his eyes caught, and why he trusted his instinct enough to step forward. His voice was calm, steady, and confident. He was not trying to prove anything. He was simply telling the truth as he experienced it. Those listening could sense his sincerity. Years of service had shaped him into someone who did not act on impulse or emotion. When someone like him raised a concern, it mattered. Meanwhile, Princess Kate continued her day with quiet strength. Her schedule had been adjusted slightly, but she did not allow disruption to change her focus. She attended briefings, spoke with aides, and carried herself with the same grace she was known for. She trusted the system around her and understood that safety measures worked best when handled calmly. Behind the scenes, further checks were made. Supplies were reviewed, staff access was temporarily limited, and extra monitoring was put in place. These steps were not meant to alarm anyone. They were simply part of a layered approach to protection. At one point, the royal guard was informed that the tea would undergo deeper examination. This did not surprise him. He expected it. He also understood that answers might take time. In matters like this, certainty was more valuable than speed. As hours passed, tension rose quietly. Not the kind that caused panic, but the kind that sharpened attention. Everyone involved knew that what had already happened could not be undone, but what happened next depended on how carefully they acted. The guard reflected on his decision again. He remembered how close the tea had been to the princess, how normal everything had looked, and how easy it would have been to ignore that small difference. He realized that the most important moments in his career were not the loud ones, but the silent ones where a choice had to be made without applause or reassurance. Late in the day, senior staff received confirmation that the issue was real enough to justify the action taken. The findings were handled with care. There were no dramatic announcements, no public statements, and no assumptions. The palace had long understood that discretion was as important as protection. Additional security measures were quietly extended. The guard noticed more presence in key areas, though nothing looked unusual to an outsider. This was how effective security worked, visible enough to act, invisible enough to maintain calm. Princess Kate was briefly updated once more. She listened, thanked those responsible, and returned to her work. Her response reflected trust and appreciation rather than concern. She knew that many people worked every day to ensure her safety, often without recognition. As evening approached, the royal guard's shift continued. He remained alert, scanning familiar spaces with renewed awareness. The palace corridors felt the same, yet different. He understood now more than ever that familiarity could never replace vigilance. Other guards spoke quietly among themselves. They did not gossip or speculate. They respected the seriousness of the situation. Each one knew that tomorrow it could be them who noticed something small but important. The day slowly moved toward its end. Lights softened, activities reduced, and the palace settled into a quieter rhythm. Inside secure offices, reports were written, reviewed, and stored. Lessons were recorded so procedures could be refined even further. The royal guard was finally dismissed from questioning and allowed to return fully to duty. No one congratulated him openly. No one needed to. The system had acknowledged his action through trust and continued responsibility. As he stood at his post that night, he looked around the palace with calm eyes. He felt no fear, only a strong sense of purpose. He knew that what he had done aligned with why he chose this profession in the first place. He also knew that the story would never be told publicly. There would be no headlines, no interviews, no recognition, and that was fine. Safety, after all, was not about being seen. It was about making sure others could live their lives without worry. Princess Kate rested that evening unaware of every detail, but fully protected by a system built on dedication and awareness. She prepared for the next day, confident that the people around her would continue to do their jobs with care. The guard's thoughts returned to a simple truth: danger did not always announce itself. Sometimes it appeared quietly, disguised as something ordinary. And sometimes, all it took to stop it was one person willing to trust their training and act. As night fell, the palace stood peaceful and secure. What could have become a moment of risk had instead become a lesson in responsibility. One decision, made calmly and respectfully, had protected a life. And though the world outside remained unaware, inside those walls, everyone involved understood the weight of what had been prevented, and the importance of never overlooking the smallest detail again. The following day began with a sense of quiet determination inside the palace. Nothing looked different to the outside world, but inside, every action was guided by deeper awareness. The situation from the previous day was still being handled carefully, and those involved understood that this stage was just as important as the first response. Early in the morning, senior security officials met again. They reviewed updated findings and discussed next steps. Their goal was not only to understand what had happened, but also to make sure it could never happen again. In places like the palace, prevention mattered more than reaction. The royal guard was called in briefly. He listened as procedures were explained and adjustments outlined. He was thanked in a quiet, professional way, not with praise but with trust. That trust meant more responsibility, not less. He accepted it without hesitation. Behind the scenes, systems were reviewed carefully. Storage areas were checked, supply chains examined, and access rules tightened slightly. These changes were subtle but effective. Staff members were informed calmly and clearly, without fear or blame. Everyone understood that safety was a shared duty. Princess Kate continued her schedule with grace and focus. She met with advisors, reviewed upcoming engagements, and spent time on her work. Those around her noticed her calm presence. She did not allow concern to show because she trusted the people protecting her. That trust strengthened everyone's resolve. Throughout the day, security staff worked quietly. Nothing was rushed. Each decision was checked, then checked again. The palace had learned over time that patience often prevented bigger problems later. The royal guard returned to his familiar position. His posture was steady, his attention sharp. He noticed small details: the way doors opened, the pace of footsteps, the flow of movement. Everything seemed normal, and that was exactly how it should be. Still, he understood that normal could never be taken for granted. The lesson from the tea stayed with him. It reminded him that safety depended on awareness, not assumptions. Later that afternoon, final internal conclusions were reached. The issue had been identified clearly enough to justify all actions taken. No public attention was needed. The palace chose discretion, as it always did. The matter would remain within official records, used only to improve future protection. When Princess Kate was briefly informed that the situation had been fully resolved, she responded with quiet appreciation. She thanked those responsible and moved on with her day. Her response reflected confidence, not concern. As evening approached, the palace settled into its familiar calm. The royal guard felt a sense of closure, not relief, but completion. The moment had passed, the system had responded, and lessons had been learned. He reflected on how easily things could have gone differently. He did not dwell on it, but he respected the seriousness of the responsibility he carried. His role was not glamorous, but it mattered deeply. Other guards rotated shifts, sharing quiet nods of understanding. No words were needed. They all knew what had been prevented. As night fell, the palace stood peaceful and secure. Lights dimmed, corridors quieted, and life continued uninterrupted. The royal guard remained at his post, calm and focused. He knew that tomorrow would bring another routine day, and that routine, protected by awareness, was the greatest success of all. Time moved forward as it always did, and the palace returned fully to its familiar rhythm. To the outside world, nothing unusual had happened. Public schedules continued, appearances were made, and life followed its expected course. Yet inside those walls, something important had changed, not visibly but deeply. The royal guard continued his duties day after day. He stood in the same corridors, watched the same doors, and followed the same routines. But his understanding of his role had grown stronger. The events surrounding the tea had reinforced a truth he had always known, but now felt more clearly than ever. Small actions could carry great weight. No one spoke openly about what had happened. There was no need to. The palace valued discretion, and everyone involved respected that. The matter had been resolved, lessons had been recorded, and systems had been improved. That was enough. Princess Kate continued her work with the same calm strength that had always defined her. She attended events, met with people from all walks of life, and focused on the causes she cared about. To those who saw her, she appeared confident and steady, just as always. Very few people understood how much effort went into keeping moments like that safe. Those closest to her noticed subtle changes. Security procedures were smoother, more refined. Staff moved with even greater care. Everything felt well managed, not restrictive. It was the result of thoughtful improvement rather than fear. The royal guard never expected recognition. In his profession, recognition often meant something had gone wrong. The greatest success was silence, the absence of harm, the continuation of normal life. He took pride in that quiet success. From time to time, he thought back to that moment, the way the light reflected off the tea, the hesitation, the decision. He knew that if faced with the same situation again, he would act the same way. Training, instinct, and responsibility had come together when it mattered most. New guards joined the team, and procedures were explained to them with care. Past experiences were shared in general terms, without details or names. The focus was always on awareness, discipline, and trust in observation. The lesson was clear: never ignore a small doubt. Princess Kate remained protected not by one person, but by a system made strong through people like the Royal Guard, people who paid attention, who acted calmly, and who understood that safety was built moment by moment. As months passed, the memory of the incident faded for most. But for those involved, it became part of their quiet knowledge. It shaped how they approached their duties, how they respected routine, and how they valued caution without fear. One evening, as the palace settled into another peaceful night, the royal guard stood watch under soft lights. The corridors were quiet, the air calm. Everything felt exactly as it should. He understood then that his role was not about stopping dramatic threats. It was about protecting ordinary moments, cups of tea, quiet conversations, peaceful mornings. These moments mattered because they allowed life to continue without worry. Princess Kate rested that night, preparing for the days ahead. She trusted the people around her just as she always had. That trust was not misplaced. It was earned every day through dedication and care. The guard remained still, alert, and calm. He knew that tomorrow would bring another routine day, and he welcomed that. Routine meant safety. Normal meant success. The story of what had happened would never be told publicly. It did not need to be. Its impact lived on in stronger systems, sharper awareness, and a life protected without disruption. In the end, no announcement marked the moment. No record would ever appear for the world to see. Yet the importance of that quiet decision remained. One person noticed something small. One decision was made at the right time. And because of that, life continued exactly as it should, peaceful, uninterrupted, and safe. That was the true meaning of duty.